Thank you very much for the organization. And I change a little bit the title to suggest to work about rest home, nursing home, that is permanent living place, and not only contractual relation. It's my main point very shortly this evening. So when we discuss about religious ethics in corporation, in firms, it's always problems, you know. We have a lot of religious people with a lot of problems, and we have to accommodate all these problems. And the question is, perhaps it is more useful to have a more dynamic and positive approach. That is to say, perhaps a common solution. And perhaps it's a common solution for nursing home and rest home. But so I limit my discussion about permanent place of living. Not only a short stay at the hospital, not only a short stay at workplace as an employee during few hours. It's a place of life, of living. So I suggest, it's my hypothesis for this evening, to leave a too legal approach or too formal approach, even from an ethical point of view, and to go to spirituality. That is a deformalized approach of what exactly happens in rest home. So I'm not afraid by words, so I put holistic on the blackboard, holistic spiritual care. I don't know exactly, because I'm a lawyer, I'm not a theologian. But anyway, we will have discussion about this in a few minutes. So just very shortly, because Leopold has very nicely explained the situation from a formal normative approach. But formal normative approach has a big problem. It is too formal. So when we discuss, I'm the head of a law and religion chair at Louvain. Law and religion, it's a big problem. Why it is a big problem? If you are listening to our politicians, it's a big problem, law and religion. Why? Because it's about norms. And politicians are thinking that religious norms are exactly the same as legal norms from the civil society. So they look at this in a conflictual terms between two system of norms. And so there are concurrence, competition. And they don't like competition about norms. But the fact is that if both sides are speaking about norms, they are going to conflict. There is no solution about conflictual norms, perhaps. A second point is that normative approach is an arrogant approach. For my own, I have truth. I have my own ethics, which is the best. And all the other people, unfortunately, are wrong with bad ideas, but very high pretension, very high arrogance. And we have creating a conflict between two arrogance about the truth, about the real norms. I'm not saying that there is no truth. I'm saying how to discuss in this kind of field. So perhaps a way to discuss, a way to have this open conversation we discussed this morning is to be modest. Modest in claiming the truth, in claiming the procedures, or how to find out to discuss. So perhaps law and religion, because they are all norms, are not the best way to deal with this kind of issues. Perhaps we have to deformalize. But just before deformalizing, and I have no time to remind these things, but we possibly could compare the US Supreme Court decisions during the last years and the last decisions of the European Court of Human Rights. They are not the same. Perhaps it's more easier in United States to say about conscience of institutions, of some institutions, like Obilobi in 2014 or Fulton case some months ago. Perhaps it would be possible, but there are conditions. And there are two main conditions. The first one is we have to discuss about closely held cooperation. And after that, we have the famous sincerity test. Not only the sincerity test of individuals, which is difficult, but also the sincerity test of institution. What is a sincere institution? It's a question. We have other kind of solution in the European Court of Human Rights. And we already mentioned this morning the green mark and the stain case. But some weeks ago, you can find also the Gashishi-Ladze case about the protection of a Sindh in Georgia. I do not want to enter into these cases. But the fact is that, and Leopold already said this, there are conditions. You have to fulfill some conditions in order to get some rights before the European Court of Human Rights, even if they are not exactly the same than in the US Supreme Court. So, it's a formal approach. I can compare case law, I can compare conditions, I can suggest something in order to write good contractual clause or agreements. But to be short, perhaps it's more easy to prove proportionality and sincerity in the United States Supreme Court than before the European Court. But please remind these two concepts, proportionality, because it's a very beautiful concept, and after that, sincerity. And now we are going to informal approach. So we remember we have problems with norms, with conflictual arrogance. Perhaps it's possible to speak about way of life. Perhaps it's not so arrogant. Perhaps it's an experience of living about his conviction, about his faith, about his own reason. Way of life. And today, if you are looking at the literature, way of life is not a good concept. You have a very good concept, and just Raymond Kress just ended his work, his paper with this discussion. So I'm very happy to do this kind of transition. We have to replace law, as you know, in organization by management, and we have growing literature about spiritual management, a lot of books, also at Springer, and it's very growing situation, very growing literature in the United States, but today in Europe too, even in the French Republic. So we have to discuss about spiritual management. What is exactly spiritual management is very complicated. But for my own, it's a question of deformalization. Deformalization of the regulation, of the norms in order to be dynamic way of life. But it's also the same for religion. As we know, we are no more speaking about religion. We are speaking about spirituality. And precisely in nursing, in literature, in medical literature, we have a growing literature about care spirituality. So this kind of concept of spirituality is deformalizing at the same time the legal approach of religion without norms and the religion itself without norms, but with a real way of life, a real faithful way of life. So it's my first point of deformalization. The same concept of spirituality is used today in order to make two transformations. Transformation of regulation, but also transformation of religion in our open and free society. So, just one word about, it's not, perhaps it would be useful in nursing home, but yoga. As you know, yoga is a very appreciated practice in all companies today. And you have some problems before courts in the United States. And I read the newspaper in France. France is beginning to have problems with yoga because perhaps yoga is religion. Perhaps it's more religious than we are thinking about. But till now, yoga is a secularized spirituality. You are nice in your body, everything is going good, with no problem. And also, till now, law is unable, or courts are unable, to understand yoga as a religion. They are looking at yoga, and they don't see religion. They see a secular spirituality. So it's very nice. Spirituality is a way to impede our legal system to understand religion and to see secularized behaviors. So it's interesting. And so it's also the question about mindfulness. Because every manager today is called to practice mindfulness, and also to invite the employees to practice also mindfulness. Mindfulness is very beautiful behavior or practice, and it is not a religious practice. Even if you have some religious genealogy about mindfulness. Today, mindfulness is a secular practice, so it's very nice. It's a deformalized approach of religion, and by consequence, the legal structure are unable to understand the system. Now, I'm not a specialist, but as you know, spirituality in care is a very huge question, with a growing literature, with also some colleagues at Louvain-la-Neuve these last few weeks. And my question is more precise here. My question is, some years ago, the nursing home were called to have a better practice of writing contractual terms. You have to improve your contractual terms. You have to improve your legal capacity in order to have good contract. That is, as Leopold said, transparency and anticipation. And now, if we are going to transparency and anticipation, what is happening? You lose your state support, and perhaps you make an invalid contractual term, because the law in Belgium has changed last year, which prohibit all these kinds of contractual term about euthanasia practice or refusal of euthanasia practice in private institution. I'm talking about private institution. So, sorry for nursing lawyers, nursing home lawyers, but the problem is no more to write better contractual terms. The question is elsewhere. And the question is, how to transform the life of nursing home without writing contracts. It's a big question for lawyers. And the answer I suggest, but it's this discussion, it's research. It's to work, it's not a new idea, it's to work about spirituality. That is to replace previously formal written contractual norms by narratives, proposals, activities, poetry. En français, projet de vie. Religious way of life, if you are talking about religion, but spiritual learning during the days of rest in these institutions, and about the creation of a spiritual atmosphere or environment. It's no more question of rational discussion about arguments. We need surely reason, rationality, and the best argument. But perhaps the best argument is not sufficient. We have to live something. We have to have concrete life experience. Perhaps it's no more question, well, did you sign our contractual term? Who refuse for you the future euthanasia and so on and so on? Is it really the question? No, the question is for the resident, for the persons to live something according to their own understanding of what is their life. It is a concrete experience. It's not a contractual term. So you have to build in this institution real activities, real atmosphere, real environment about what we are thinking about life and faith and other things. And that's why it's very important to restrict my discussion about permanent living place. It's not just going a short stay at the hospital. It's a place of permanent living, where everybody has to create a community. Not only the doctors, not only the boards, but also all the persons. They have to build together a real community. It's a big question about civil society. It's a very dangerous or difficult discussion about civil society, but we are no more discussing about civil society this evening. We are discussing about private institutions. How to build private institutions without contractual terms. And at that point, you may remember what we saw about the formal distinction, the formal approach some minutes ago. That is, we have to discuss about closely held institution. What is closely held institutions? It's not a question only of contract. It's a question of closely held. And we have to discuss about sincerity. What is sincerity? Yes, I am sincere because I have signed the terms. No. I am sincere because I am living what I say that I live. And it's possible to discuss or to see what is exactly this experience in this place with another experience in another place. So I arrive at my conclusion. So perhaps we have to have reflection, attention, research about living legal and formal ethics or law, contract, to holistic narratives, different kind of real life. But the problem, it is my conclusion, unfortunately, is that last year the Belgian Parliament not only prohibit written terms, but also prohibit unwritten terms. It's very interesting to prohibit unwritten terms. So are they prohibiting spirituality because it's unwritten? Are they prohibiting poetry, narratives, prayers? Perhaps it's possible to understand life without pronouncing the word euthanasia, perhaps. Or is it unwritten euthanasia, which is prohibited? You know, if we are engaging a prohibition about unwritten things, what exactly will happen tomorrow? And it's also my question. We already discussed this morning about conscientious objection and freedom of expression, freedom of speech. Informal freedom of speech. Informal freedom of speech, it's, I think, the real question for tomorrow. What are you really thinking? Perhaps in your forum internum. Don't answer the question. I just have a look on your behavior. You were praying yesterday, isn't it? Oh, it's strange. Are you sure it's not an unwritten clause or an unwritten term? So, I think deformalization is a question we have to discuss, we have to deal with. But at the end of the day, today, we have another question. It is about deformalized prohibition by the law. And it's a very difficult question for democracy. Thank you.